I didn't even start thinking of anything until I was 28. Like, I didn't even realize that I had to grow up until I was 28. I didn't even start to think about, oh, well, how do I really feel? But I would have never done this shit for myself if I didn't have this new perspective of, hey, life is happening very fastly and you better make your memories now because you don't know. All the things you told yourself, I'm going to do that when I retire. No, do it now if you can.
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too. Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying your long weekend. If that is something you are able to do, quick shout out to Brene Brown's episode this week, which addresses what is on her mind with everything happening. And I fully recommend getting her perspective. And she explains a little bit of the psychological behind the scenes as to why some people might be behaving the way that they are. So shout out to that. I think it's very important. Very excited to share Samantha Hale's interview with you today. We were able to speak in the fall of last year, connecting over what it's like for her doing comedy in quarantine. And she has great nuggets of wisdom on how to stay positive through dark times and explains how she lost both of her parents and what she learned. And I'm grateful to have spoken with her. Fun fact, her grandfather is Hale Jr., best known as the skipper from Gilligan's Island. I love that. And I also wanted to shout out her debut comedy album, Only Happy When It's Raining Men, which released at #1 on iTunes. I was able to see in person her hour recording of her album, and it is fantastic, so definitely check that out. Sam has been featured on Laughs on Fox and Hulu, Epics, and is the co-host of Pandora Box Show on iHeartRadio. So, here we go. Hey, Sam, Hale, welcome to the virtual pod. Thank God I'm seeing a human today. So,
hi, human Chelsea.
I appreciate you, and I have to say, it's a weird time for comedians, but I'm so in awe and inspired by your comedy. You're fucking hysterical. So I'm excited to introduce you to the audience.
It's so weird. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, I'm a comedian. That's right. That was a thing that I did every night for 10 years. And now I haven't really done it in 5. Well, I've done a couple shows in the park, which is fun. Kind of, it's different for sure. You can get heckled by a poodle, which I was. But it was good it was weird to go from doing Zoom shows to, oh my God, oh shit, you're a human and you can hear me and you can see me. And oh, wow, okay. Like, I forgot half my jokes, but that's fine. It's fine.
I mean, I'm truly impressed that you have done that in person. I mean, that's a huge step. A lot of people have not done that still. So you're awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've only done it twice, and both times there were several comics who were just like, oh God, this is the first time in 4 months. I don't know what to do or how to feel. It's very strange. It's very strange.
Did they use a real mic and audio system, or was it like a hairbrush?
So, valid question. So it's this park down in West Hollywood. It has like a built-in amphitheater, which is kind of nice. It's kind of part of the park where there's like seating in it and you can spread out comfortably, and there's kind of a stage at the bottom. And Carol Newell, who runs it, she just brings her own system. I bring my own microphone, just to be safe. Why not? But they wipe it in between and everyone wears a mask and stays apart. So it's the best we're going to do for a while, I think.
I think so too. And I mean, it is better than nothing. I think it beats Zoom. I mean, at least it's a real show, right?
Yeah. I mean, Zoom has been really great from keeping the rust away. You still kind of are in the vibe. And I have a weekly show with Jackie Steele and Aluja, and it's half drag and half comedy, which is really fun. So we kind of spice it up, and, we do funny numbers and we just roast each other. All we do is harass each other for 2 hours. It's kind of fabulous, but it's good because it keeps you, I co-host with Aluja, and so we banter. It keeps your crowd work. You can do crowd work on Zoom. If you just look at the boxes, you can make fun of their living room, wherever they are. And if you have a weekly show, it forces you to write at least something new every week, which is good.
Good for you, Sam. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I know these things exist and they're popping up more and more, but I still think it's incredible that you've committed to that, because a lot of people are, sure, there's comedians doing it, but there's a lot that aren't. So again, reflecting back, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a huge believer in Listen, our brains are in trauma mode right now. We're in survival mode. Everyone processes grief and loss and stress differently. So, like, I saw someone when quarantine first happened, somebody posted, if you don't come out of this with a new hour of material, you're not a real comic. And I'm like, listen, no, no, not everyone processes the same way. And if you're stressed out, you might not be inspired to write. Also, what are you going to write about right now? We've all made the Clorox jokes and Netflix has done jokes. Like, we've done all of that. So now that things are, you can kind of sort of, I've gotten out and done a lot of outdoor activities. I'm a huge nature person.
Mm-hmm.
That's what kind of kept me going. And that was when I started getting inspired to write again. It was because I did some sort of life outside of my house. But I didn't want to write for the first couple months. I forced myself to, but I didn't get a lot because I wasn't really there.
Right. That's a good point about actually having something to write about. They always say, like, you have to experience life to write. And also just thinking about, even if people are getting more material in comedy about the bizarreness of quarantine, like, how many shows are we really going to want to go to next year where all the sets are just all about this year? Maybe a few, but then we're good.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we don't know how audiences are going to feel when clubs start to open up. They might not want to, maybe they don't want to talk about it at all. It's like politics. Sometimes there are super political comics and that's great. But then there are sometimes when the audience is just not into it. They don't want to hear about it. I mean, I've done shows where the owner will just say, hey, anything's open. You don't have to be clean. Just please don't talk about politics. I can guarantee you they don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. You know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like you feel the room and we don't know what those rooms are going to feel like because we don't know.
I'm curious, when you bring up the political angle, do you personally have political jokes that you're like, okay, plug and play, these audiences definitely know, like you said, these do, are you just kind of like, if I can, cool, or do you have ones that you really hope you can do? Just curious.
Well, in LA, you're mostly going to get away with doing, if you're a Democrat, if you're making fun of Trump, you're probably going to get away with it. Mm-hmm. But the last shows that I did before lockdown, it was actually the weekend before we shut down. I was in Reno with Jessica Michelle Singleton, who's amazing.
Love her.
Yeah, she's everything. We had an incredible time, but they were very sensitive there. They didn't really go for the dark. And that's kind of like, there might be some conservatives in that area. So it's kind of like, it depends on your mood, kind of. If you're an established headliner and you're there and you already know you have a following, you can probably get away with a bit more than me. Like, I was featuring for the first time at that club to make a good impression. I didn't want to push too much. You know, I threw in a little couple things that are kind of not so aggressively liberal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you read the area, read the room. I mean, I have a friend, Tamer Katan, if you know Tamer, he's a brilliant comic. He told me this story about, he was in the Midwest somewhere and there were some avid Trump supporters in the front and they got real aggressive with him and security had to walk him to his car.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just because they were in such disagreement with his anti-Trump jokes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they just didn't like anything that he had to say that was against, that was about equality or racism. They didn't like any of that. So but there are definitely days when I go out there and I'm like, I don't really care. This is the joke that I feel like doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm doing and I'll deal with it accordingly. But then there are times when you're surprised. Like years ago, I show at Flappers. So, that's in Burbank. So it's LA. But I did whatever jokes I did. And I didn't know that there was some sort of a Republican convention. And there was a shit ton of Republicans in the crowd. And they didn't like anything I said. But I didn't realize that was going to be a problem because, I'm in LA. But then I had to, you have to find a way to get them. So.
Mm-hmm. Such a good point that there's a lot of different people out there. And then there's also the interesting aspect as to when you're hoping to get something specific across that changes people's minds versus when you're really trying to bring joy and laughter and not have an agenda attached to that, which I think is okay too. However, it's an interesting time now. Like, what is let's say comedian's point of view and perspective in terms of making a difference versus is laughter and joy making a difference? I think yes, but it's very interesting. Everyone has a different vibe on that.
That's the beauty of comedy, is that there really isn't a right or a wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I think is absolutely hilarious, somebody else might not get. But that doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong or vice versa. It just means that's not your sense of humor. I think about that a lot because a lot of my stuff is really dark. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But a lot of my stuff, a lot darker. And I'm comfortable with it. But sometimes people aren't. So I have a lot of tags in my back pocket, knowing that this is either going to get a huge laugh or a huge groan, and they're going to get real uncomfortable. And you have to know what to do. You have to have all these little tricks up your sleeve to make them comfortable again, to get them to trust you. Like, it's like you push them a little too far, and then you bring them back. And then you push them a little too far, and then you reward them and you bring them. It's, that sounds like I'm training a dog. That's not what I'm trying to do. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a huge fan of safe comedy. Not that there's anything with it, but there are a couple, they're just very like clean, wholesome, good fun, and they don't really kind of offend anybody. I'm like, boring. But someone might look at my comedy and be like, oh God, you're too much. So it just depends.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree. I like pushing it too. And it's good to remember that like the quote unquote people that don't like could still have a great career. So it all.
Totally. I mean, I remember, so we started with Lisa Sunset.
Yes.
Pretty Women. I always remember Lisa telling me the story about how she would go down to the La Jolla Comedy Store with Natasha Leggero. And, Natasha, like, she's such a specific point of view, and she's kind of like a character, right? And Lisa's kind of like the every woman. Like, she's very likable and she's not offensive. She doesn't push buttons. She just, she has some darker stuff, but she's just super likable. And Natasha is so quirky. And so she would go down, and Lisa would kill every time. And Natasha often kill, but when she killed, she would destroy, because like she found her people. And even if, let's say, there's a room full of 100 people and some of the crowd doesn't really get what you're doing, but half of that crowd really gets what you're doing, they're going to follow you, and then they're going to help you build a career by being like, oh, that girl's really unique and really special. I like what she does.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two ways of, you can be really niche and say, this is who I am as a comic, this is what you get, and I'm doing what I like it or not, like Maria Bamford. Or you can, I don't know, I don't want to say play it safe, but kind of like just be really likable and funny, and then everyone's good, if that makes sense.
Yes. It's like, are you Disney Channel? Are you HBO? Or are you NBC?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they're all good channels. It just depends on what you're in the mood for.
Right. So. And like NBC might make more money typically. Well, these days, not sure. But generally, like NBC might make more money, but then HBO might have more of a following. And then Disney might have more family following, which could bring in that kind of money. So, yep.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's so many different tastes in the world of art.
Well, I'm excited to talk more about your specific taste. And I just love, this was just, normally I'd start talking about grief first, but the comedy jazz just got me so psyched to talk to someone about comedy, like for the first time in a few days or weeks, months. Yeah.
I was just like, what day is it? Time doesn't matter. Who cares?
I don't know. Everyone's like, this year is a non-year. And I'm like, it's true. And it's also like such a year that we'll always remember, but also just hopefully
a year that we don't ever want to talk about ever again. It's like Groundhog Day. Every morning you wake up, you're like, again? Yeah. Oh God. Okay.
Truly. Okay. So something I like to ask everyone, one of the first questions I usually ask is about your goldfish moment. And what I mean by that is your goldfish moment is the first time you thought about or conceptualized death in some way. For some people, it was their goldfish. I'm curious if something comes to mind.
Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
Oh, I was like, why goldfish? Oh, I get it. Goldfish. Yeah, I flushed a few down the toilet.
Did you?
Oh, over the years? Yeah. I mean, as a kid, I was fat. I was like an overweight, weird child. So I had all animal friends, like for sure. I had lots of animals. The first loss that I remember really impacting me. I mean, I'm sure that there maybe was, a bird or something that was really sad. I remember I used to love my parakeets. I always had parakeets. And that was always really sad when one day you'd walk in the room and the bird would be kind of rolled over on the bottom of the cage. That's really sad for a kid. But my first big moment was when my grandma passed away. My mom's mom passed away of lung cancer. And I want to say I was in 5th grade. And I remember, I guess it must have been my mom coming to my school and like pulling me out of class. And so it was just this big deal. Like, why are you here in the middle of my class? And why do I have to leave? And am I in trouble? And what happened? And her telling me that and feeling immense sadness, but not really grasping what happened. I mean, in 5th grade, know a lot about cancer. So that was probably the first big loss. But the first time that I was a little bit older enough to kind of understand what it meant, I think I was about 12, and it was my great aunt Karen, my dad's aunt. I always looked up to her a lot. And I think when it happened, I had spent the summer with her because we used to have this big, beautiful house behind the Chinese theater, which like so cool for this kid to go to this like Hollywood house. And I always kind of like resented her a little bit because she was kind of an authority figure and she was very strict and had manners. And I wanted to be the actress. And she was like, okay, because she was a script supervisor. She was very well connected. And I was like, I wanted her to make me a movie star, obviously. And she was like, no, you'll go to school first and then I'll help you. Like, she was really strict. But I kind of loved her for it. But I kind of was like, oh, Karen. But I loved her so much. And so when I found out that she passed, I remember I was in my room. I just remember like pounding the floor and just crying and like just being mad. And yeah, it was a lot. And I remember being like in so much pain that, I don't know, I was like, oh, is this why people hurt themselves? Like, this really hurts. This is really, really awful. I didn't, but I don't know. That was like the really understanding what it means for someone to be here and then not here. Because my grandma, she lived in Northern California, so I didn't see her regularly. So it wasn't like this is this recurring presence in my life who now all of a sudden is gone. But with Karen, she was in my life. So a lot more. I mean, I loved my grandma dearly, but she lived far away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that the two of them are the first hard ones.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting that for some people, even though it's so long ago, it's so vivid and like,
yeah. Well, emotions, when you're that emotional about something, it like makes a dent in your brain. I don't know explain the science of it, but I do know that it does make an impact. And that's why you remember things so clearly because you're so emotional.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for coming today. We're here to honor your mom. I would love to hear a little bit about your upbringing. Like, can you share like who you grew up with and what it was like growing up with your mom specifically? And if you could speak to a little bit more about her diagnosis. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people listening who have a mom with cancer currently or who have lost their mom to cancer, and just sharing more about that journey to relate to them.
Right. Well, my mom hit me twice as hard because I had already lost my dad. Like, I lost my dad when I was 22. That obviously was the first big loss because a great aunt or a grandma is not your mom or dad. I mean, my parents split when I was little, so I went back and forth a lot between them. They both had their different styles for sure, but I didn't really get close to my mom until I was an adult. Like, I mean, we got along as best as we could in my preteens, teens, early 20s. But I started working on myself. I started going to therapy. I started I never really dealt with my dad's death. Like, my way of dealing with, so my dad, he had sleep apnea and he never really treated it. And he just didn't really take care of himself, unfortunately. So it all kind of caught up to him and his heart gave out. And it was awful because I was there. I saw the whole thing. That's the worst thing that a kid will ever have to do is call 911. That's the most terrifying thing. But my way of dealing with my dad's death is I actually made a documentary about music, about the therapeutic value of music. I just started going to concerts and I started filming different artists and all the fans. And that's kind of I distracted myself rather than dealing with it. So it eventually caught up with me years later. And I was dating this guy who was not good for me at all. And so I kind of had this like terrible breakdown. And my mom swooped in and was like, okay, no, get up. We're going to get you up. We're going to get you talking to someone. And I'm super grateful to her for that. And I eventually wound up with this one therapist named Leslie. And Leslie was like incredible. She just really got me together. I mean, she was really fantastic. And a lot of stuff from my childhood came up, as it does in therapy. And so one day she said, would you feel comfortable bringing your mom into a session? I said, yeah, I guess we could do that. Ask her. And say this, my mom was amazing. She went in there. She said, yes, I'll do it. And as hard as it was for her to hear a lot of stuff, she never got defensive. She just listened and she just said, I didn't know that. I'm glad you told me. Like, she was really incredible. So after just a few weeks of that, we just started getting closer and we just started getting closer and closer. And when my dad passed, my mom actually moved in with me because I was this 22-year-old mess of a kid. And all of a sudden I was in probate and I had all this legal shit. The IRS was coming after me for my dad's shit. It was a nightmare. And I think that's when my mom and I actually had friction because we lived together and I was having a terrible time in life. So once we had those sessions and she wound up moving out, we got super close, which is great. I'm sorry, what was the original question?
No, I can't believe I didn't know that about your dad. So I'm so honored that you're sharing that. And I think that's really helpful to someone who has lost both of their parents to hear from you. And I was asking about, your upbringing and, who you grew up with and what it was like when your mom was diagnosed. But you've been through a lot. Thank you for sharing all of this.
Yeah. I mean, you're in this really kind of fucked up club. You're in this little orphan Annie club that no one wants to be in. But you see everything differently. Everything changes. Everything changes. You can explain it. Wait, do you still have your dad?
My dad died in college. So my mom is combating cancer and my dad died.
Okay. So got you. So, okay. I mean, you know exactly how it is, but when it's then both parents, it's like, whoa, everything changes because really your mortality becomes real. The concept that people you love are going to be gone becomes real. You have to grow up in a way where you realize I have to solve my own problems. If this happens or this happens, I can't call. That's why chosen family is really important. I'm not close to any of my other family, unfortunately, which is a bummer, but I have a really incredible chosen family. And that's good. Like my roommate and one of my best friends, Jessica, we've been friends since high school. She knew my dad. You really it's wonderful to have people in your life who actually knew your parents because they can crack jokes at you about them that you'll get and vice versa. Because my dad was a character. He was a weirdo. I mean, God, he was such a weirdo. I love him for it. She could remember fun little stories. So it's nice to keep them alive through people who know them. But it is a bummer where you think, God, there was this story about my grandma that was really funny. How did it go? And you realize I can't call my mom or my dad and tell me how that story went, which is sad. But you do learn to appreciate life. Absolutely. 100%. I started doing my bucket list. Like a bucket list is kind of something you do when a lot of people start traveling or doing that thing that goes, oh, I'll do it later. I'm like, no, I'm not doing shit later. I'm doing it now because I've seen how fast people go. So that's, I guess, the best thing that's come out of it is everybody processes it differently, but I'm fearing in a way that I've never thought I could be. I put up with less. People used to treat me poorly and I'd be like, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. And now I'm like, no, I know how to, just because you realize life is short, you have to know if you're going to come at me with some bullshit, goodbye. I don't need that, and that was kind of, I don't know, a lesson that I learned from all of it. Really.
Yeah, I was going to ask, about lessons too. And what is one piece of advice you would have for someone who has recently lost both of their parents? You're already kind of talking about advice, but I'm curious if there's one thing that comes to mind.
Well, a really good piece of advice that I was given. Do you know Anna Valenzuela? She's a roast battle comic. Anyway, she's fabulous. she's my age, but she's lost her parents even before I did. And one of the first things she said was, your humor is going to get very dark really fast, and that's okay. Be okay with it. People are going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay.
I love that statement.
Yeah. Like, you're not responsible for them being uncomfortable. You have to process however you have to process. And it's funny because, I mean, I'm sure you know what it's like. You crack jokes about your mom having cancer, and you can crack this joke, but then someone gets all offended. And I'm like, dude, it was my mother. I can say what I want. If I choose to crack this joke, my mom would have thought that was hilarious. So if you're offended on being, goodbye. Like, that's the one thing that frustrates me. People are like, oh, I'm like, it was if this is my way of processing it, if this is my way of dealing with it, because comedy is tragedy plus time. You know, your loved one who you lost wouldn't want you to sit in darkness. They would want you to continue and to thrive and to keep going. I don't know, everyone has different beliefs, but I still think my mom's still around. I still think she sees everything. I can see her, I can feel her at times. There are sometimes it's just such specific things happen. I'm like, no, that's not a coincidence. That was her. Very, very, I mean, my dad might be a good example of that, actually. It was maybe 4 or 5 months after he passed away. And I used to go to the beach. When I missed him, I would walk by myself on the beach because my dad just made me think. I felt close to him there. And there was one day I'm walking along and I say to myself, I wish that I knew he was okay. I said, Dad, I want to know that you're all right. You left so suddenly and I wasn't ready. And I just want to know you're okay. And then I keep walking, and maybe 10, 15 minutes later, this little thing rolls up out of the water. And I look and I'm like, oh, it must be trash. I thought some trash was coming out of the ocean. And I always pick up trash when I see it. So I go to pick it up, and it turns out it was this small yellow ball with a happy face on. A fucking happy face. I said, are you okay? And I get a happy face. I still have it. Like, I can show it to you. It's insane. There have been times I always call my mom Ladybug. So I call her Lady, and then it kind of came in the Ladybug. And one of the last things I showed her, I got a little ladybug tattoo for her. And I have the word lady. Ladybugs have appeared at very, very, very specific times. There was one time, so I went on a trip for a few days, kind of by myself, because I was like, I want to go be in nature. And so I went up to Washington State to go up to San Juan Islands to go hopefully try to see orcas. And I was on this bus to get up there, and I was just really sad. And I was just thinking, what am I doing? Why am I on this trip by myself? I was just felt so lost. And then all of a sudden, this bug just landed on the window, like literally right next. And I look at it and I think, it looks like a ladybug, but I probably want it to be a ladybug. So I don't know, whatever. I don't know. But then it just stood there, and it stayed on this bus on the freeway. I'm like, how is this small little round bug staying on this window? This is insane. Minutes later, it kind of walked off, and I had the thought, yeah, that was cool, but I don't know for sure that was a ladybug. If I could have seen its spots, I would have known that was her. No, whatever. 5 minutes later, the thing walks back and turns over so I can see its spots.
Wow.
Yeah, things like that. I mean, just very, very specific, weird things. I don't know. I just feel like she's still here. Maybe it's a coping mechanism for me to feel better, but I don't think we just vanish. We just disappear into nothing. There's still some sort of energy somewhere. Yeah.
I love that. I think so too. I think there's something, and it's always interesting to talk to people because everyone has a different opinion, but it's like, I think that there's got to be something. I agree. I don't think it's just like your soul is nothing. I don't know what it means, but I appreciate that perspective for sure. What was it like when your mom was diagnosed? Did you find memories of your dad coming up, or did it feel like a very separate experience?
Ooh, I don't know. I never thought about that. Well, when she was first diagnosed, I mean, the denial hits you immediately where you think, okay, well, she'll beat it. She's young. They have treatment now. Chemo will get it. But the problem is that, so she went in, she had uterine cancer, and she went in years before she was diagnosed with spotting. And so to Kaiser, I'll never go to Kaiser again. Kaiser missed it. They completely didn't think anything of it. Either they didn't order the right test, or I don't know what happened. But if they would have caught it then, she'd be alive. But they didn't. So by the time that they caught it, it was stage 4. But the whole time you think, it's okay, we're going to get through this, and I was also, I don't know, I was still kind of caught up in my own bullshit, like things that I thought were such a big deal. Now, once you go through traumatic loss like that, once you realize what doesn't, hindsight is 2020. A huge part of the grief cycle is the guilt, right? It's like survivor's guilt. It's the coulda, woulda, shoulda. So as soon as she passed, like I back and I thought, oh, well, I should have done this and I should have done that. And I wish I would have been there more. But I didn't know that then. I mean, hindsight is 2020. I was also in denial. I just didn't want to accept even the idea that she wasn't going to beat it. So, and she could have. I mean, she had a hysterectomy and we thought, great. Okay. So we did some chemo. And then the tumor started shrinking. Well, we thought this is a good thing. We'll do the hysterectomy. We'll get the rest of it. It'll be fine. And I remember a conversation with the doctor where he said, even after the hysterectomy, she might only have up to years. And that was hard to hear.
Sorry, you cut out. Will you say what the doctor said one more time?
Oh, I remember having a conversation with the doctor regarding the hysterectomy. And he said, even with that, she still may only have up to 5 years after that. And that was hard enough, thinking 5 years. I mean, and now I would have obviously been so thrilled to have her another 5 years. But the problem was it spread to her stomach. And then that's why she couldn't, that's why she didn't make it. So, yeah, I mean, I look back and I think, oh, coulda, woulda, shoulda, classic grief cycle. But I don't know. You learn so much from it. You can't explain that to someone who has their parents. You just can't. You can express your feelings to the most intelligent person you know, and they can comprehend it. They can understand, oh, yeah, that does sound awful. But you don't know the feeling until you know the feeling. And another very difficult part was people who I assumed would be there for me were not. And people who I didn't realize would show up for me did. So that was, friendships change everything because you change. That's the thing. I mean, I had a best friend at the time who I thought was going to be a friend of mine for years to come. We're no longer friends. Part of it is because I changed. I changed so much that I was realizing things, and it wasn't my place to ask him to change, and so I had to let him go. Be like, you're no longer good for me. Even friendships. I'm not even talking about relationships, because I was single at the time. I was attempting to date when all this shit was happening, and it was just obviously none of it worked. But you change. It changes you. It changes your perspective. It changes what you're grateful for. It changes petty shit people think are important. It's not. It's not. Oh, well, so and so said that. Who cares? Gossip, drama, all that. Just stop. Stop it. Stop it. We're all in this world together, and we're not here for a very long time. So if someone is crossing boundaries or doing things that are inappropriate, why tolerate that person? Just be like, okay, well, we're not meant to be in each other's lives, and that's okay. That's all right. But I would have never had the strength to feel that way before losing her. So she made me, the whole thing made me pretty strong. I mean, I remember, this is kind of a weird example, but speaking of, like, you just kind of have this, the only thing I'm afraid of now is fucking cancer. I'm not afraid of a lot anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember soon after she passed, I wound up going on this trip to Australia. And it was cool. I mean, it was a nice distraction, but it was still really, really hard to be grieving in another country. But it was only there for a couple of weeks. But because you don't know when the outbursts are going to come. You're going to be fine one minute, and then all of a sudden you're going to have an epic breakdown in a bar or wherever you are, and people are going to be like, what is wrong with that girl? And you can't even it's such a loss to explain it to people. You're just like, just go away.
Yeah.
But if you say that to a person who's lost their parents, they get it and they know what to do. Like, the cliches of people say, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, or, oh gosh, yeah, no, that's so horrible. Don't say that to me. What I appreciate is someone, and this is what I do to people when they go through loss. I'll just say, listen, it fucking sucks. It's going to hurt for a long time. It's going to hurt so unbearably bad that you don't think you're going to get through it, but guess what? You will. I don't sugarcoat it. I don't say, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm just like, this sucks. And I learned that from my mom, because towards the end, I had a house on hospice. It got to the point where there was just nothing anybody could do. And so when she complained about something hurts or something, I would try to fix it. And that I would be like, well, let me get this pill, or I'll call a nurse, or I'll do this. And one day she just said, you know what, Sam, just say, I know. Just say, I know. That sucks, Mom. I know. And that was like, whoa, that was kind of mind blowing, but she's right. The fearless thing is because once you go through that, you're like, nothing's going to be that hard or that scary. So I was in Australia, and I'm kind of a nerd anyway. I love like haunted places and ghost tours and crazy weird shit that normal people are probably like, you want me to get in the water with a shark? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like that's who I've become. I've become that bitch. It's like cage diving with a great white. Let's go.
Have you done that?
Yeah.
Cool.
I did it. I actually did it. It was the first like big thing that I did for myself after losing her. And it was actually the first time that I felt any kind of joy since she died. Like, it was actually a really heavy moment because you're in the cage, and I went down to Guadalupe Island. So it's like there's just sharks everywhere, and they're fucking big. They're huge sharks. So I'm down in the cage at one point, and they look you right in the eye. They look you dead in the eyes, and they're so graceful. They're stunning. They're so beautiful, and they're so smart, and they all have different personalities. But there was one who just like, she just came right up to the cage, looked right at me, and then just kind of circled, and then was just kind of hanging out. And I just started crying. Like, it was such a beautiful moment. And it was the first time that I felt like my mom was like, hey, feel joy, be happy. I felt like she was there, like, hey, enjoy this. And then I realized you're crying with a mouthpiece and goggles. Like, you're 10 feet underwater. You're not going to be able to breathe. Don't be an idiot, you know? So I had to kind of check myself. But so like moments like that, or there was a moment like, so when I was in Australia, we went to the oldest prison in the country in Fremont, and they have these irrigation system under it that the prisoners built. They created this water system. The prisoners actually literally built their own prison, which is kind of sucks for them because they got shipped over from England as, you know, felons, and they had to build their own. So, wow. But you could take a tour of this system. It's like a waterway, and it's pitch black, and it's creepy as fuck, but it's super cool. But you have to go down this really dark, long tunnel. You have to climb down it, basically. And the woman was like, well, you know, if anyone has claustrophobia, or you don't like bugs, or you don't like rats, you might want to go the other way instead. And everyone just kind of looked at each other, and I was like, fucking, I'll do it. Put me in. Whatever. That's kind of my attitude now. I was like, yeah. I just, my last bucket list thing that I did, I went and I snorkeled with whale sharks, which is literally the largest shark. I mean, they're massive. They're so beautiful. But I would have never done this shit for myself if I didn't have this new perspective of, hey, life is happening very fastly, and you better make your memories now because you don't know. You know, all the things you told yourself, I'm going to do that when I retire. No, do it now if you can.
Right.
So we're out there in the middle of the boat. And I went to Mexico by myself because I'm insane. I don't care. Like, shit just doesn't scare me anymore. It doesn't. And people look at me like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because no one wanted to go with me, or because I wanted to go. That's why I went. You know, I'm not an idiot. Like, I make sure that everything's safe, and I do my research. And so a professional tour with professional, you know what I mean? Not an idiot.
Yes.
But
you're cool. You're admirable. That's what you are. You're fucking cool.
Nuts. But we get out there, and they're like, okay, well, who wants to dive first? And everyone in that boat looked at me, and I was like, okay, whatever, you know, throw me the fuck in the water. And let everyone.
Wait, so there's no cage for that one?
No, you swim right with them. They're beautiful. Like at one point I was swimming right above one and there was a giant manta ray right under me. It's gorgeous. So basically the idea is you jump in the water, the captain will kind of stop the boat right in front of where the sharks are. They kind of position you so that you're jumping right next to one. And as soon as you jump in, the first thing you have to do is swim for your life and try to catch up to its mouth. And then you swim alongside its mouth. And that's how you're able to keep up with it. So.
Wow. Wait, did you like have to train for something like that?
No. I mean, whale shark, they eat microscopic organisms in the water. You can't even, I mean, they're not going to eat you. Their mouth is huge, but their throat is the size of a golf ball. Like they can't actually eat you, even if they have tiny, tiny, tiny teeth. They're not going to hurt you. They're called the gentle giants of the sea.
This is so interesting. I had no idea. I had no idea you did this. This is fascinating.
Yeah. I think kind of what I'm doing really is living out my childhood fantasies. I'm kind of trying to make my inner child happy right now because that's just keeping me going. And for me, it was always animals. That was always, like the big. And my mom was the same way. She loved animals and horses. We grew up riding horses together. But that's kind of the thing that I've been trying to do, getting myself through this quarantine, is giving myself something to look forward to.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I'm curious, how I'm sure other comics know that things are generally sad, but I feel like everyone can offer some beacon of inspiration. So curious what you've been doing to keep yourself busy and what you've been looking forward to.
Yeah, well, you kind of have to, especially when you have a recent loss. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who've unfortunately lost people during quarantine, which I cannot even imagine how brutal that is. I mean, I'm not working. I don't know that I'll be working anytime soon because obviously none of the comedy clubs are open. And then my other thing that I did was I work on drag shows, and it's the same thing. None of us know when our gigs can come back. So I've been realizing, okay, you have to give yourself little things every few weeks or something to have on the calendar.
Yes.
So the whale shark thing was the first big one. And I was super nervous about it. I'm not going to lie.
Wait, you did that in quarantine?
Yes, girl, I did. I sure did.
Oh my God, you are the coolest. Wait, when was that?
Just a month ago.
Oh my God. Okay. That is the most interesting quarantine thing that anyone I've talked to has done. I'm so glad to hear this.
Yeah. Well, I researched a lot about it, and I have a friend who is working COVID test sites, and so she's very knowledgeable at everything. And I asked her, I said, am I a complete idiot to do this? Is it complete? And she said, all right, listen, I'll hook you up. She got me an N95. She got me gloves, hospital strength sanitary wipes. She told me what to do on the plane. She said, if you have to drink, hold your nose, don't eat on the plane, wipe everything down. I was so careful when I flew. And I, of course, made sure that there weren't any restrictions flying into Cancun. I know that there were some people were having trouble, I think, driving across the border, but there weren't any air restrictions. So I said, okay, the tours are half capacity. So there was literally 6 people on the boat. It's all outdoor. You wear your mask.
Right.
The company that I went with, I love it so much. It's called Cancun Adventures. They were amazing. And I think they take this virus actually they're more respectful in Mexico than we are.
Interesting.
Every mask. You are required. You're legally required to wear your mask in a car too. If you're on a federal highway, you have to wear one. The beaches are closed. Restaurants are closed. Everything's pretty much closed unless you're going to go out and get on a boat, which is what I was going to do. So I'm fine.
Right.
They take your temperature before you can go in anywhere. I mean, I was still able to go to the beach, which was wonderful because it was a private beach and there was literally nobody there. It was great.
Nice.
But yeah, I decided to do this. I'm dying right now. I'm grateful. I have food. I have a home. I'm one of the lucky ones, but emotionally I'm freaking out. And that was something that I thought, okay, well, at least I can get a bucket list item checked. And part of it too, though, was just the timing where they're only there for 2 months of the year. It was just the right season. And I thought, fuck it. I'm not waiting another year. I can't. I don't want to wait.
So is it weird that I'm more surprised by the sharks than the COVID? I'm oh yeah, COVID. Oh my God, but sharks.
I know. Well, I mean, normal people probably don't want to get in the water with the shark. So I understand that. I realize that I'm the weird one here. I get it.
No, it's so cool though. Like that, you're like the version of myself that I want to be. Like I want to be like, yeah, I do that. I do this.
Oh, wait, can I ask you how old you are?
I'm 29.
Okay, so you're getting about to where I didn't even start thinking of anything until I was 28. Like I didn't even realize that I had to grow up until I was 28. I didn't even start to think about, oh, well, how do I really feel about things? And wait, is this important or is this important? You kind of start to think about that in your late 20s. And then you kind of start to relax a little bit and you get more 32, 33. So I was just starting to kind of do that naturally. And then losing my mom just kind of propelled me ahead into this new thinking. If you realize that there's something that can make you happy on the inside and it's something you can do for yourself, why not do that?
I completely agree. I wish I was like less scared of stuff like that. But I have other weird stuff I would do. But no, I mean,
like what's something
I
that you want to do? Like what is something that you want to be able to say when you're 80 on your deathbed, whenever you can be like, oh yeah, but I did that. What would that be for you?
Oh God. Okay. That's scary to be asked.
I scared the host. Fantastic.
You scared the host. I don't know why my first thought was I want to be naked. Okay, that's so weird. I want to be more comfortable. Like I don't know. This is so weird, Sarah. I don't know what's going on. I would like I think of the most freeing moment of my life, and that was like studying abroad. And then when we were in Barcelona, we were all allowed to be naked, and I just thought it was so cool that no one thought it was weird, and it wasn't shameful, and it wasn't embarrassing, and it wasn't about sexuality, and it wasn't about women's boobs mean this when you take off this. It was just like a neutral slate, and I've never felt like so
I love that.
alive.
I love that.
Yeah.
So then,
and I don't want to be naked on Instagram. Like that's not what I'm saying. That's not my goal.
Yeah, no, you're not being naked for attention. You're being naked for freedom. That's two different things. Actually, a friend of mine just posted a picture from a nude beach, and it's in San Diego. So I can find out where that is for you if you want, and you can go.
You're gonna like follow up with me, be like, "Did you go to the nude beach?"
I mean, I am that person now, where I'm just like, if someone says they're excited about something, I'm like, well, what's up? Let's come on, let's fucking do it. What are you waiting for? Like, well, I guess the question, what are you waiting for? Especially now in quarantine, if it's something that you can do safely, what the fuck else do you have better to do? Like, if you're not working, if you're just kind of sitting around waiting for life to start. Try to start any kind of life that you possibly can. I mean, like yesterday, we went down to La Jolla and we snorkeled with leopard sharks, and it was beautiful.
Wait, yes, literally yesterday.
Literally yesterday.
Oh my God, I had no idea we were going to go here. You are so cool. You're like the shark goddess. What good stand-up material too, my God.
I mean, I have the whole chunk on it. I wrote, when I got back from Mexico, I was so inspired. I wrote like a new 10 minutes on my experience there. Like a few weeks ago, I drugged my friend Jackie Steele to come with me. I took her to a wolf sanctuary. You know, that was something else that I wanted to do. So I was like, well, let me find me a wolf sanctuary. You know, like I'm kind of picking different animals that I loved as a kid and figuring out to hang out with them, because it's something inspiring and exciting for me to do that's outside that you can do safely. And also it supports the rescue group. They need to be supported too. Great. So it's like you help people who are helping animals, you know, like this wolf sanctuary, it was all wolves who were taken out of the movie industry, that were basically disregarded because either they didn't look right or they didn't behave well enough, you know. And that's like,
what did you do there? You
get to go in and you get to actually so there was a couple wolves that are they didn't let you in to like feed them or anything, but there was wolf. I have a picture of him on my Instagram. His name was Denali, and he was just the most beautiful white wolf. And he is a healer. He's actually a healer. I mean, when you look into a wolf's eye, it's just the most beautiful thing you'll ever see. And he was so calm. I just connect with wolf. And this one, he's actually an amputee, so he's missing a leg. And unfortunately, he had another leg that he injured himself. So, and he just got a cast off. So he's like he's not going to jump on you or anything like that. So they allow you to go in and pet him. So I went in and I just sat with him, and there was just, I don't know, I just fell in love with him. And we just kind of like cuddled for a half hour, and he put his head on me. He fell asleep in my lap. And I just thought, this is an experience I'll never forget. And this is something that little 8-year-old girl would have lost her mind if I told her, guess what you're going to do? You know?
Yeah.
So you just kind of realize that, like, I'm sure that there were things that my mom would have wanted to do that she figured, oh, I'll do it later. You know, I don't want to be in that position. I don't think she wants me to be in that position either.
Do you mind me asking, how long was she combating?
It was about a year. I feel like
that's very quick.
It was quick because the first several months we really thought she'd beat it, but then it took a turn for the worse very quickly. Like, basically, you know how cancer is, like, you start doing well and it's great and you go into remission, but then it comes back with a fucking vengeance. It comes back real aggressive. And that's what happened. So, I mean, the hardest part for sure, obviously, was the hospice. I mean, that was only a couple, 2-3 weeks, but I don't wish that on my worst enemy. I really don't.
What was that like? Or if you have any tips for anyone who's going through that right now?
You just have to get through it. I mean, all you can do is just be with them as much as possible and talk to them as much as possible and say anything you possibly want to say. It will get to the point where they can no longer speak, but they can still hear you. They say that they can hear you up until the very end. So even though sometimes she couldn't acknowledge that she was there listening, I knew she was listening. So I don't know. That's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. That's why I feel like I can do all this stuff now. Because I think, well, I got through that. Nothing's going to stop me now.
So for your stand-up, I know it's like separate, but it makes me think of your stand-up. So you've been doing stand-up for a long time and very successfully, and you keep climbing the stand-up ladders. You're a hysterical comedian who's very well-rounded. Like, you have very grounded jokes, but then you also can get really dark. And your commitment and audacity and like is just so unwavering, even just from like the time that I've known you. You're just someone I would really look to as like, oh yes, Sam Hale, like she's doing it. Did you have a passion for this your entire life? Probably, but I want to hear it from you. And can you talk about what that's been like while navigating your parents' death and how it's interacted with that versus stood on its own?
Yeah,
that was long-winded. Just tell me about your stand-up is what I should have said.
Well, I actually did not grow up wanting to be a comic. I didn't grow up listening to stand-up. It was something that happened later in life. Long story short, I mean, I wanted to do the acting thing because that's what, so my grandpa was an actor, my great-grandpa was an actor, my great-grandmother was an actress. Like, I thought that I was worthless if I wasn't an actor, basically.
Your grandpa was a super successful actor.
He was all right. Oh, he's pretty cool. So he was Alan Hale Jr., who played the skipper on Gilligan's Island. And then
no big deal.
And then his father was Alan Hale Sr., who was in all the movies with Errol Flynn. He worked with Bette Davis, Errol Flynn, anyone you could imagine in old Hollywood. Because, you know, he was a contract player with Warner. He was Little John in the original Robin Hood, you know, pretty cool stuff. But yeah. So,
and you cut out, but you said contract with Warner Brothers, just if anyone missed that, because that word cut out.
Oh, right.
Right? That's what you said.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, he was a contract player with Warner Brothers. And so he was pretty much Errol Flynn's sidekick. And I thought that's, you know, what I had to do. And people assume that because I come from that family that I had connections, but it's not true, unfortunate, because they've all passed away or retired. And Hollywood is just a different animal than it was back then. Very different.
Yeah.
So I was doing the auditions and I was trying to do all the right things and I was not getting where I wanted to be. And one day a friend of mine said, do you want to go to the Laugh Factory? They're having the Women of Chelsea Lately. Do you want to see it? And I said, sure. And I remember thinking, wow, these women are so confident and they have opinions and they know who they are. It was everything that I wanted to be. And I wound up talking to Natasha Leggero just briefly, and she told me about Lisa Sunstead and Pretty Funny Women. And that's how I started. That's how I found Lisa. So I didn't even think that I would be doing it as a full-time career. I thought, oh, I just want to try it. And 10 something years later, I'm at it. But it's the fearless thing. It's the I look at it now like, okay, I can write this joke, and what's the worst that's going to happen? You're not going to like it. Okay. Like, it's not as heavy to me now because I've been doing it long enough. So your skin gets thicker, and you just kind of accept the fact that this is how it works. Sometimes jokes can work, sometimes it's not. And you trust yourself to know that if you try this new joke and it doesn't work, you trust yourself to know enough that you can figure out how to get them back. Not going to be, if one joke doesn't work, it's not the end of your 10-minute set or whatever you're doing. Just buck up and get over it. Whereas before you'd go home crying, it didn't work and I'm terrible, and now I'm like, I've just been at it long enough. So it is time. That's how I got confidence.
You have so much material. I went to your hour taping, which was hysterical. I can't wait to we'll definitely have to link that. But you have so much. I feel like you must, I'm like, oh, Sam must have 6 hours of jokes. Well, that's what I think.
I might have 6 hours, but that doesn't mean it's all good. I mean, you have a lot of jokes that are going to work in certain rooms, but not in other rooms, or are going to work on the West, not in the Midwest, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I have enough that I'd like to record another album again, but I don't know when that'll be, if that'll be anytime soon. I'm sure that people are going to figure out new ways of being creative in this new that we're kind of venturing through. But yeah, it's like something just kind of clicks. There is a click in your brain where obviously you want to connect with an audience, but you stop asking for their approval, if that makes sense. It just it's a confidence thing. It's a trust exercise. It's also a being okay with the outcome. I mean, if you do your fun jokes that work every time, okay, fine, great. You know what the outcome is going to be on that. But when you're doing new material or you're doing really dark stuff, you don't know, and you have to be willing to take that risk. But again, when you've dealt with a loved one in cancer, it's just nothing else seems as important. And so you kind of realize that if my joke doesn't work, I'm still going to be okay. The audience is still going to be okay. I'll figure it out. And that kind of new perspective allows you to do way more. You trust yourself. You trust your instincts. I mean, I've been doing more crowd work than I've ever done. I mean, that's definitely a comfort thing, but it's also I like it. Let's talk. What's up? I have a story. I'm sure you do too. What's your story? There's more of a connection there because I don't know, because I don't edit myself as much. That's what it is. I let myself say what the first thing that comes out of my head is now, as opposed to, oh, was that funny? Are they going to like that? Is that woman not going to like it? She looks a little conservative. She probably wouldn't want me to, whatever, who cares? Mm-hmm. And that freedom, it's such the catch-22. It's if you're not trying too hard, they're eating out of your hand. If you're trying too hard, they don't trust you. It's just like dating. If you come on too strong, they're like, but if you come on I'm here, you're welcome, then they're like, oh, I trust her. She knows what she's doing.
Right.
Yeah. And that just takes time and life experience.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things that the industry has its cliches about ageism and sexism, which rightfully so, because a lot of them fortunately do hold truth. But I think with stand-up, you can only get better with time and age and experience. There's no denying that you just keep getting better. It just keeps getting better. Where some of the other parts of the business, it's is it going to be better? But stand-up, I really believe that it will, for those who want to.
Yeah, that was something that definitely drew me towards it, because you would see people who wouldn't break out until they're in their 50s. People that have been doing it for 20, 30 plus years. And then all of a sudden they're an overnight sensation. I mean, they're not, but it seems that way. And
right.
I love that, because it's with acting, there are so many incredible, wonderful actors. There are also a lot of names. They're celebrities, right? They get hired because they have a big following, or because they're beautiful, or because their uncle is so-and-so. But I do feel with comedy, if you're not funny, you're not funny. It doesn't matter who you know or how pretty you are. You have to do the work. You have to do the work. You can't take shortcuts. And I like that. That is, I feel hard work pays off more in stand-up than perhaps in acting, just because it's so out of your control. There's so many actors who are working so hard and they just don't get that break. And it's for reasons that's out of their control. If they're too short, they're too this, they're things that's not their fault. But if you're out there and you're busting your ass in comedy every night, you're going to get better. You're going to get better. And it's a direct response. Like with acting, someone may go up and do a monologue. And if it's like, say someone does a comedic monologue, if nobody laughs, then you're not doing great. But if you do a dramatic monologue, you're not supposed to laugh. So you don't know if you're doing great. You know what I mean? When you're on stage trying to elicit jokes on a specific punchline, you know if you're doing well or not. You know, but that's also kind of a complex idea also though, because I can take the same set in one room and destroy it. And then I can take the same jokes to another room and bomb.
Right. Do you have a few of your favorite shows or stand-up moments that you wanted to share? Like something you're really proud of? Like, oh, like I did this show in Washington and it was amazing. Like curious if there's a standout moment in your stand-up.
Yeah, there's definitely been a few. A moment that I will remember forever because it's just the most obscure thing. So there was one night, I was only a few years into comedy, and I was at this show and we were in the bar, and it's like a Tuesday 10 p.m. show. And we think this is going to be awful. It's going to be here. It's going to be a nightmare. And we're all in the bar. And then all of a sudden we look over and Dave Grohl is sitting in the corner. And we're thinking, why is Dave Grohl at our show? This is okay. And, and my mom thought he was so handsome, which I think is so great. My mom had the biggest crush on him. So I thought, well, it'd be cool to go say hi. I don't want to bother him. He looks like he's with his family, which is also weird. Why is his family here? This is weird. And then we go into the showroom and he walks in with his whole family front row. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? So the host goes up, doesn't say anything. 3 comics go up. No one acknowledges him. I'm thinking, what is wrong with you? You have a legend. You have an iconic rock star in the front row and none of y'all are okay. So I thought about, what do I do? How do I make this fun? And then I realized that I have a joke punchline. It's literally drummer. I'm just making fun of drummers. And it's one of the first jokes I ever wrote. Like, it's not even that great, but I do the joke and his whole table starts dying of laughter. Like they have just erupted because, he was the drummer for Nirvana. So they're dying laughing. The rest of the audience is like, yeah, okay, I guess it was funny. I don't see why they're laughing so hard. And then I was like, you guys, Dave Grohl's in the audience. And I just did crowd work on him. I just talked to him for the rest of my set. And after the show, I spoke to him after and he could not have been nicer. It was just a really cool moment of like, I am performing for this legendary artist and I'm having a great time with him. I'm shooting the shit with this big time dude and I'm holding my own. I was really proud of myself for holding my own. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense now. I didn't know it at the time, but we're buddies now. My friend Tim Hanlon was hosting and Tim is Dave's cousin. So that's why he was there.
Oh,
yeah, it makes sense now. Yeah. I didn't know that. And the funny thing is maybe a year and a half later, I was at this dive bar by my house and it was like a writer's room, open mic kind of a thing. And I'm working on some jokes and Dave Grohl is in the corner. And I'm like, what? It's Dave Grohl here again at another crappy comedy show. I don't understand. But I thought, I wonder if he'd remember. And I went up to him and you could tell he had kind of the look of like, oh boy, someone's going to want a picture. But he was polite. And then I said, hey, I don't know if you remember, but I'm Tim's friend and I did the show. And he was like, oh, you're the skipper's granddaughter. And so he was so cool. So it was really like, kind of amazing to think this incredible person knows who I am and remembered my jokes and had a good time. That was a pretty cool moment. And then flip side, the worst time I've ever bombed in my entire life was following Tig Notaro.
Oh, really? Oh God. What happened? Yeah.
So it was Lisa put together a reunion show, kind of alumni of Pretty Funny Women, all of her friends. And I was only maybe 2 years, a year and a half comedy. And she decided to allow 2 student spots. So she gave me one and she gave Zainab Johnson one, if you know Zainab. Mm-hmm. So we all went out to dinner beforehand. So it was Tig, Retta from Parks and Rec, Maria Bamford, Sean Polofsky, Trish Sir. It was just like these incredible women. And I was so fucking nervous. I was so overwhelmed. I shouldn't have gone to that dinner because they all know each other and they're all so funny that I couldn't keep up. I just sat awkwardly in the corner and I was so like, I was just being quiet. And I'll never forget, Maria actually came up to me and sat next to me. She was like, "Hey, what's your name?" Like, she was so nice. She made me feel so much better. So then we go across the street to the club, and Lisa has her lineup very specifically laid out as
Oh, I miss Lisa's shows. I miss the word lineup. Like, what?
No, it's like a thing of the past, which it shouldn't feel like that. But so at the last minute, Maria's like, "Oh, I have to be at the Laugh Factory. I have to go first." And then Tig was like, "Oh, yeah, I got to be at the Improv. I have to go after that." So then she wound up putting me after Tig. And Tig is so brilliant and dry and just quirky. There's no way I could follow the Taylor Dane story. A year and a half into comedy, I got really nervous. I started pacing. I, like an asshole, did all new jokes, thinking that, like, oh, I can't do the same jokes that I did because I was an idiot. And I completely ate it. And I didn't get out of bed the next day. I was so bummed. But I'm glad I kept going. I'm glad I eventually got back on the horse. But yeah.
I'm glad that it's nice and human to hear when people who have come out the other side and have like so much success with your stand-up. I know this year is weird, but in general, you totally do. And the fact that you bombed one time like that, I don't know. I think that's helpful to hear. So thank you.
Yeah. Listen, we all have those moments, whether all these comics want to admit that shit or not. Any comic who goes in thinking that they're going to do well every time is probably not that great of a comic. Like someone who goes in, unless you're Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle can do whatever he wants. He's Dave Chappelle, But a lot of us are neurotic is all hell, So we go in thinking, oh God, I got to make sure this is right. And why didn't that work? And that's how you get better, is by not thinking you're the best. You get better by realizing, okay, I can keep working on this.
I love that. And we're coming to time. So we'll wrap up pretty soon. But I wanted to ask, I feel like people ask about advice for stand-up, and there's the things like keep going and show up every night, which I totally actually agree with. People say them for a reason. But curious if there's any structured nuggets of wisdom you could leave for upcoming comedians, whether it's about showing up or about the writing process.
Oh gosh.
And that's okay if not, but I'd be curious.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the way to figure out how you're going to be the best writer is just to keep doing it. When you first start, people are going to say you have to write every day and write stream of consciousness, do this, do that, do that. And that's fine, do that. But that might not necessarily work for you. But in doing that, you might realize that doesn't work for me. I'm going to try this instead. It's like you just have to keep going. And you can't force inspiration when it comes to writing. Like sometimes it just pours out of you. But the one thing that I will say though, is that it does get easier in time because your brain starts to recognize opportunities for jokes a lot faster. Once you find your voice and you know what kind of structures you like, you can plug things in way faster than before.
Mm-hmm.
And that just takes time. That's just like going to a gym and working out. Like if you're doing 50 reps a day lifting this one weight, you're going to be able to do that pretty easily. It's going to hurt at first, but then it gets pretty easy. So your brain is the same way. It's going to hurt to put it together the way you want it to at first because it's frustrating and you don't know the rhythm of it. But then all of a sudden, once you realize what your rhythm is, oh, well, I can kind of write this other joke that has a similar structure, but it's a totally different joke because that's my voice. I like to have a surprise at the end, or I like wordplay, or I like long stories. Once you find your voice, it all gets easier. And the only way you can find your voice is just to keep doing it. And that just takes time. And that just takes, again, time and life experience. That's why older comics, that's why they're so fucking good. Because they've just been at it and they've also lived their life and they have and you evolve as a person. Therefore, your comedy is going to evolve as well.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness. There's one little thing to look forward to amidst all of this. Yeah, I appreciate that too. I mean, and anyone listening who is like struggling with inspo or writing right now, I think that's relatable.
Don't beat yourself up if you're not inspired right now. If you're don't beat yourself up. Find something like a whale shark, for example. Find something like that has nothing to do with comedy. And that's going to be a way to unblock yourself. If you're happy, if you're inspired, then jokes are going to pour out of you. If you're forcing it because you feel like, I'm in quarantine, I need to learn a new language and lose 10 pounds and do that. Fuck that. No, that's not the way that your brain or your discipline naturally works. Then don't force it. You're not going to change who you are just because you can't go to a club, you know?
And I mean, I've been frustrated with myself. I'll just put out there just because like I felt like finally really stand-up wasn't the first thing that I did either. And when my mom was diagnosed again, it's kind of like you're saying, what do you want to do? And like, this was it. And finally the past like 6 months, you know, I'm sure a lot of people would say this, it did feel like really going to the next level and like finally having some out of town shows that were obviously canceled. And then now I'm working full time. Like I'm making videos for BuzzFeed, which is a blessing, but my stand-up has not been the priority. I'll just say this year. And it's sad because then I'm getting mad at myself, but it'll be back, and talking to you is so helpful.
But how can you be mad at yourself for not making stand-up a priority right now? That would make sense to make stand-up a priority right now. You have to take care of yourself right now. So, and everything that you're doing to get through this bullshit that we're in is going to lead to comedy. It just might now. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to make it a Chelsea therapy session. So I appreciate, I appreciate that. And like, it's just sometimes in life, you can't put your main energy into everything all the time or no one can. So it's just figuring it out.
Right. 100%. And also going through life experiences, that's going to change you. So you have to give that the energy that it needs. You know, and if that takes you away from stand up for a minute, that's okay. I mean, you're dealing with a lot and you're trying. See, I did the same thing. I'll make this brief because I know we have to end. But even while she was sick, I was still doing comedy. I was forcing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself. And, you know, looking back now, I realized I should have spent every second with her. But I also realized I don't think she wanted that. She didn't want to take my life from me. So it's kind of like you're fucked if you do, you're fucked if you don't. Yeah. So you just kind of have to find that middle ground of finding a way to keep yourself kind of protected, emotionally, productive, artistically, and also kind of a neutrality. It's just kind of a neutral space of like, I can just be right now. I don't have to be doing something. I can just be right now. And that's going to help your stand-up. It's going to help your ability to be present for your mom.
Thank you for that. That's powerful. And the being versus doing, I feel like for a lot of us comedians or like just people in LA grinding, like we're doers, right? Yeah. We're not like the being type, but then that being, you need the yin and the yang. Right. And if you're comfortable in both, your doing is going to be more powerful if you know how to be sometimes.
Right. And I didn't know that until I went through all of that with her. I didn't understand any of that yet. And that's okay. That takes time to learn.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like I could definitely keep talking to you for like 2 more hours. The podcast episode's going to be like, sorry, this was a 6-hour one, guys. Right. Before we like plug your stuff, like, I guess my last question for you would be, is there anything that you wish that I had asked, or any last closing thoughts that you wish people could know about you and the Sam world and your comedy and what you've been through with your parents?
You have to take care of yourself. You have to. You can't be a good comedian. You can't be a good daughter, son, friend if you're not giving that same love that you want to give to other people to yourself. I wish that I would have figured that out before I didn't have a choice but to figure that out. You know, we're only here for a while. Just remember that. You have to make the most of it. And not everyone's going to be here as long as you are. And you might not be here as long as someone else wants you to be. But that's just kind of it's acceptance. You have to accept this shit. If you can find a way to accept it, you can find a way to live on another level. There's a freedom in accepting, I don't even know that accepting is the right word. I think surrendering might be a better word. You have to surrender to fight as hard as you can for those you love, obviously. Take care of yourself, but you also just kind of have to let yourself be sometime, if that makes any sense or doesn't sound too hippy dippy, you know?
No, it does. The power in just being. And hopefully someone listening can take that in, because that's something that no matter how many times someone tells me that, it's like, I can never hear it enough, because I always go to, what am I going to do? So thank you for reminding.
Absolutely. Stop beating yourself up is what I'm going to say. Yeah.
Love that. This is like off topic, but I don't even know if I'll keep this in. Do you know the comedian Courtney Lloyd? Like she's up and coming in like Lisa's world. Yeah. I was just curious if you guys ever talked, because she was my first person I interviewed like over a year ago about losing both of her parents. So I was wondering if you guys have ever talked about that.
We haven't spoken in depth about it, but we were actually, when I was running Lisa's studio, when she was doing her open mics, I was working with Courtney on that. And she has so much energy. I mean, I love that. Yeah, she's I don't know. Yeah, I wish I had half the enthusiasm and smile that she had.
Totally. She's got it going on. We have the same. It's funny. I go by Chelsea Lloyd, although Lloyd was my dad's first name who died. But like people think that we're sisters because we both have Lloyd, but also my real life sister's name is Courtney. So it gets very confusing.
That's wild.
Wild. This was so great, Sam. Where can people find you online and like the Zoom online stuff you're doing? If you want to plug that, where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my social media, Twitter and Instagram is at the Samantha Hale. Apparently there's a regular Samantha Hale that I have to murder because I had to put a the in front of it, looked like an asshole. So the Samantha Hale. And then I'm on Facebook as well as Samantha Hale. We have been doing work, W-E-R-K. Yeah, work, like work, bitch, because it's a gay old time. And we support a lot of LGBTQ artists. And we have queens on there, and it's fabulous. We do that every Thursday at 7 p.m. You can certainly find us on Facebook. We just started, we have been doing it on Zoom every week, but we started doing it on Facebook Live. And it's actually a lot of fun because everyone can watch and comment. And so I think it'll be available actually on my page, Jackie Steele Comedy as well. You can find it on her page. And what would be really wonderful if you guys want a fun album to listen to and you want to hear all the terrible things I say. And I talk about my mom as well. I have an album on iTunes and it's on everywhere streaming, Pandora, Spotify, etc. It's called Only Happy When It's Raining Men. And it is my first album and I'm super proud of it. I would love for you guys to check it out. You can get on Apple Music if you have the subscription. And some exciting news is we did film it. And so we're going to have a visual version of it coming out probably in January with Comedy Dynamics. So I'm very happy about that.
Congratulations. That's so cool. So is it the show that I went to, like that same show? Okay.
It was that one that we filmed. We got it all together and it's a process. Everything kind of takes a while, but I'm just very grateful to them for picking up and releasing it. And we're hoping for like early next year.
Awesome. Congrats to that. Hey, in terms of things to look forward to, that's definitely something to look forward to. And I would highly recommend people definitely check out the album because it was such a great show to go to. And I'm so glad that it can exist for other people to see because you were fucking hysterical, so hardworking. You're great at what you do. Like you have wonderful energy. I'm just excited for the 2021 Sam Hale because she's going to be back and better than ever.
As long as she doesn't get eaten by sharks,
Stay tuned on that. But I can't wait to hear about like that in stand-up. That's stand-up gold. I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.